The year was 70 AD, and Rome had just finished doing what Rome did best, conquering things loudly. Jerusalem smoldered beneath black smoke. Soldiers marched through shattered streets carrying stolen gold, broken shields, and enough arrogance to supply an empire for centuries. Emperor Vespasian sat comfortably in Rome calling it peace, which was Roman for everyone else lost. Meanwhile, ordinary people were trying very hard not to die. In the crowded streets of Antioch, a baker named Marcus pulled burnt bread from his oven and sighed dramatically. This, he declared, holding up the loaf like a courtroom exhibit, is what happens when the world ends before breakfast. His sister Lydia rolled her eyes. The world is not ending. The Romans burned Jerusalem. Yes. They're arresting people for suspicious gatherings. Yes. And old Publius says barbarians are invading from the north. Old Publius also thinks goats can predict earthquakes. Marcus paused thoughtfully. To be fair, one goat did bite him before that tremor last year. Lydia ignored him and continued packing bread into baskets. Their tiny bakery smelled of flour, smoke, and exhaustion. Since the war, fear hung over Antioch like bad weather. Rumors spread faster than rats. The Christians especially had become convenient targets. People whispered strange things about them. They drink blood. They worship a criminal. They refuse Roman gods. They call each other brothers and sisters. Suspicious. Marcus rubbed his forehead. I still think calling the communion meal the body and blood could use better marketing. Lydia nearly laughed despite herself. Marcus, I'm serious. Maybe bread of hope? Cup of joy? Something less murdery? Before Lydia could answer, the bakery door burst open. Old Publius stumbled inside, panting dramatically. It's happening, Marcus groaned. If this is about the goat again. The governor posted new orders, Publius cried. All citizens must offer sacrifice to the emperor by the end of the week. The room went silent. Lydia slowly set down her basket. Roman loyalty ceremonies were common enough. Burn incense. Say a prayer to Caesar. Go home. Simple, unless you were Christian, because Christians insisted there was only one Lord, and unfortunately for Rome, it wasn't Caesar. Marcus swallowed hard. Well, that's inconvenient. Inconvenient? Lydia hissed. Marcus, people have been imprisoned over this. Yes, but I cope with fear through understatement. Outside, bells rang through the city square as officials nailed proclamations onto walls. By evening, Antioch buzzed like a kicked beehive. Some people hurried to temples immediately, eager to prove loyalty. Others stayed indoors, whispering prayers behind locked doors. And everywhere, fear grew teeth. 3 nights later, Lydia attended a secret Christian gathering beneath a candlelit cellar. About 20 believers sat shoulder to shoulder, sharing bread quietly while listening for footsteps above. An elderly man named Matthias spoke softly. Rome believes power comes from fear, he said, but Christ taught power through sacrifice. A young man interrupted nervously. Sacrifice sounds noble until soldiers arrive with spears. That, Marcus whispered to Lydia, is the most honest thing anyone has said tonight. Matthias smiled faintly. We do not seek death, he continued. We seek faithfulness. Suddenly, bang, bang, bang. Fists hammered the cellar door upstairs. Everyone froze. Marcus muttered, well, this feels historically significant. A woman gasped, and someone dropped a cup. Above them came shouting, Open in the name of Rome! Panic erupted instantly. One man tried hiding behind a curtain despite being twice the curtain size. Another whispered, Act natural. Marcus stared at him. We're hiding underground at midnight eating symbolic flesh bread. Natural left hours ago. The door crashed open upstairs. Heavy boots thundered downward. Roman soldiers poured into the cellar with torches raised. The centurion looked around with deep disappointment. You people again? Matthias stood calmly. Peace be with you. That phrase always makes arrests feel awkward, the centurion muttered. The believers were dragged through Antioch's streets the next morning, while crowds gathered to watch. Some mocked them, others pitied them. A cabbage narrowly missed Marcus's head. Oh good, he complained. Now vegetables hate us too. At the governor's platform, citizens lined up to offer incense before a golden statue of Caesar. 1 pinch of incense. One sentence. Caesar is Lord. That was all Rome demanded. When Lydia's turn came, the governor studied her carefully. You're young, he said. You have family, a business. Why throw your life away over stubbornness? Lydia's hands trembled. Marcus looked terrified beside her. The crowd leaned closer. At last, Lydia spoke quietly. Because if fear decides what is true, then Rome becomes God. Murmurs spread through the square. The governor frowned. You Christians confuse defiance with courage. No, Lydia replied softly. You confuse power with truth. Marcus leaned toward her. You know, he whispered, this would be a wonderful moment for a miracle. No miracle is coming. That seems inefficient. The governor ordered them imprisoned. But something strange happened over the following weeks. The Christians did not break. In prison, they shared food. They sang hymns badly but enthusiastically. They prayed for sick prisoners, including Roman guards. Marcus once spent 2 hours comforting a thief who had literally stolen his sandals. Why are you being nice to me? The thief finally asked. Marcus sighed. Because apparently that's our whole philosophy now. Word spread through Antioch. The Christians cared for plague victims no one else touched. They visited prisoners abandoned by families. Even while threatened, mocked, and beaten, they refused violence. And this confused Rome deeply. Because Rome understood rebellion. Rome understood armies. Rome understood revenge. But stubborn kindness? That was unsettling. One evening, the same centurion who arrested them approached Lydia's cell quietly. Why do you people keep singing? He asked. Lydia smiled faintly. Because it annoys you. The centurion fought a laugh. Then his face darkened again. You know some of you may die. We know. And you're not afraid? Marcus answered from the corner. Oh, we're terrified. I personally panic every morning before breakfast. That is true, Lydia admitted. Marcus pointed proudly. Thank you. The centurion stared at them for a long moment. You really believe this Jesus rose from the dead? Silence settled across the prison. Then Matthias spoke gently from another cell. If death is defeated, the old man said, Rome stops being terrifying. Something shifted in the centurion's expression. Not conversion, not yet, but doubt. And doubt was dangerous. Months later, many prisoners were released after public pressure eased. Others vanished into martyrdom whose names history barely remembered. But the movement did not disappear. It grew, quietly, relentlessly. From Antioch to Alexandria, from Jerusalem to Rome itself, stories spread about strange people who faced hatred with mercy and answered cruelty with faith. People who sang in prisons, people who shared bread during famine, people who refused to worship emperors but somehow loved their enemies anyway. And in taverns, markets, and crowded streets, whispers began rising across the empire. If Rome kills them and they still refuse to hate, what do they know that we don't? The empire believed power belonged to swords, armies, and fear. But history was already turning, not through conquest, through endurance, through ordinary believers stubborn enough to love in a world built on violence. And somewhere in Antioch, Marcus burned another loaf of bread and announced dramatically, I would just like history to remember that revolutions are extremely stressful.